Okay. All right, I guess we're on then. How's it look over there? Oh, good. Excellent. For all to see. Welcome. Thank you. I can't see any of you because of the bright lights. Go fig. Oh, there you are. Wow. A lot of people. Okay, so how many of you have been listening to Off the Hook? Okay. Yeah. No, you don't count because you work there. You don't count because you call in late. And who else? Okay, good. So I want to start this off preferably in a better vein than I'm doing right now, but that's what you get for leaving things at the last minute. I do have to start with a bunch of disclaimers. There is a competition going on, in case you did not know. Any statements expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of 2600, the Hope Conference, the Hotel Pennsylvania, or any client or any employer, past, present, or future, or any individual whom your present interlocutor is in the habit of defining by means of the perpendicular pronoun, or any affiliate thereof, with one exception. This one does come from the security desk and info desks. Do not go up to the roof. Do not go down to the basement. You will not live to regret it. That's the only official message I have. A broad spectrum of viewpoints on potentially controversial subjects are presented from time to time, which do not necessarily reflect any official position of the aforementioned. Again, with the exception of don't go there. Any mentioned product, service, person, organization is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an endorsement in any shape, manner, or form. Next page, eventually. No compensation, monetary or otherwise, including cups of coffee, has been received during the preparation of this lecture, and no compensation other than voluntary contributions of goodwill is expected as a result of this lecture. It's my tuchus, I have to cover it. And more importantly, tips are welcome, jobs doubly so. Case notes presented may be based on real events, and personally identifiable information has been anonymized to protect the innocent. Any anecdote, data presented, should be considered fictitious yet credible. That's a nice way of saying it's true. No identification with actual persons, places, buildings, or products should be intended, nor should it be inferred. Yeah, you can tell I came from the Communication Arts Department. No animals were harmed in the making of this lecture. Well, except for Juan Valdez's donkey, because he had to haul an exceptionally large amount of coffee. Okay, enough with the disclaimers, with the exception of one. Cuando el periférico de salida principal no es video, será disponible en español a partir de las 14 horas en la sala Hoover, piso 18, por allá. I'm done. Welcome. Anybody left? I really can't see. This is quite the light. So, as heard on WBAI, some of you may have heard it, some of you may have missed it. You can always get it on a podcast, right? Yeah. Thank you. Rob T. Firefly. Is blind politically correct as a word? The answer is it's not really a dirty word. It is someone who cannot see if you need an alternative, someone who is visually impaired or has poor or weak eyesight. It can, however, be used in a disparaging term, such as to be blind to something, to be deaf, dumb, and blind, or to be a Copa America referee. Now, at the risk of answering a question with another question, it's really more along the lines of, is handicapped politically correct? If it is for you, then it's fine. If it's not, then it's not. Bernie S. Is Bernie S. in the audience? He's at this con. I've seen him. He brought this up during the show, and he caught me kind of off guard. So you guys are going to get the whole spiel. He asked whether or not the ADA Act extends to online services, which is a very good question. Unfortunately, he was talking about Section 508. There's the full title and code if you want to look it up yourselves, but the gist of it, always have a hard copy, folks. The gist of it goes like this. It requires federal agencies to make electronic information and technology accessible to people with disabilities. So federal government or contractor thereof, the answer is basically yes. And the standards for determining employment discrimination under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 applies. What I was thinking, was the Chafee Amendment. Now, the Chafee Amendment is slightly different. The Chafee Amendment has more to do with the reproduction of copyrighted works in Braille, audio, electronic or web Braille, or other specialized formats. This has more to do with the ability of the National Library Service of the Library of Congress to be able to make talking books. I have an exemplar here. Basically, it's an overglorified USB drive. The only difference is somebody had to sit in a booth for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and I'm not kidding when I say hours and hours and hours, to read a book and then correct their mistakes. And then go for hours and hours and hours and hours, and then send it down to be processed into this, basically, remember cassettes? This is what it's based on. Pop it in, play it, and you don't have to worry about copyright because of the Chafee Amendment. Although, I will say, I'm not a lawyer. That's not carte blanche. Next up, what else is going on right now? Because this is not a sexy topic. I have to acknowledge it. There's no hackery involved. There's no malwares. Well, actually, there is one mention of malware. There are no exploits, really. There are more along the lines of, don't be a jerk. And you're going to hear most of them, but in the meantime, women in cybersecurity, understanding Tor Onion services and their use cases. Feel free to go if you like. I won't be offended. Besides, I can't see anything because of the light. All right, so now we finally get to the part where I say, you can't leave just yet. It would be a disservice if I let you leave this room without the 60-second accessibility speech. And here we go. Accessibility is not the following. Number one, it's not about dumbing down your content. It's not about spoon-feeding your information. It's not bypassing security for convenience. And it is not separate but equal access. So what is accessibility? Well, accessibility is a very simple theme. Self-reliance, self-sufficiency, the minimization of intermediaries, technological or biological, and integration into the mainstream. Now, if you just take those couple of points on your way out, I will have done my duty. So now I get to go a little bit further into it. We're going to start with the demographics about vision impairment and blindness, and we're going to contrast it around the world, because there are 7.349 billion humans on planet Earth, not just hackers. 246 million people on this planet are visually impaired. Now that's low. Is there anything up there? Okay, good. I can't see it from here. There are 246 million people who are visually impaired on the planet. That's 3.347% of the planet. Let me just read off a couple of cities that population matches. Jakarta, Delhi, Manila, Seoul, Incheon, Shanghai, Karachi, Beijing, Sao Paulo, Mexico City, Mumbai, Moscow, greater metropolitan areas, plus Brooklyn. That's a lot of people. Or, put another way, France, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and whatever's left of the United Kingdom now that Brexit is taking place. Right. Contrast that to the number of internet users who use Linux. So everybody you know going around with some sort of penguin logo on them, double it. And you pretty much have the overall rough total of the number of people who are visually impaired and or blind. So blind, 39 million people in the world. Now, that's 0.5%. You'd say statistically not significant. Well, let's put it in contrast. Tokyo and Yokohama greater metropolitan area, plus the Bronx, is about the same proportion as the number of people in Poland. Yeah, Poland. Contrast it to 37 million people on this planet are infected with HIV. It's about same. Blindness, HIV. Do the two overlap? I honestly don't know. You're free to go to the United Nations World Population Data. Look it up for yourselves. That last tidbit I happen to know off the top of my head comes from UNAIDS, and it's accurate as of a year ago. So we've covered the demographics. We're talking about, on the whole, 4% of the population. I wanted to start with a quote. I'm going to leave the name of the person who wrote this a little bit secret, but you can find it. In 1972, anybody remember 1972 in this room? Okay, good, we got one at least. In 1972, I got a call from the State Department. I said to them, can I do for you? Uncle Sam, what do you want? They wanted me to go to the Soviet Union. Anybody remember the Soviet Union? Okay, at least one person does. It turns out they heard you develop this code, and that's being used around the world, several countries, and they would like to know more about it. Let me just reiterate for those of you who don't remember the Soviet Union and were not around for the Cold War. That was the mortal enemy. This is the U.S. State Department in a cultural exchange. So he says, okay, who's paying for it, And it turns out the Soviet Union would pay for it. This is unheard of. Well, almost unheard of. So all expenses were paid by the good old Soviet Union. 4 years later, he gets another call from the State Department. You want to go back to the Soviet Union? Well, a great answer here. Well, I said, why? Well, they said they had a request from the Soviet Union. They want to know how the hell a blind person can access the screen of a computer. I went back in 1976 and I told them. That was 40 years ago. Actually, more than that, probably. 44 years, considering the initial venture into the Soviet Union, just to teach what really is the bleeding obvious. The person who wrote this is the late Dr. Abraham Nemeth, probably well known for Nemeth Code. That's the Braille, I want to call it an encoding, but it's not really an encoding. It's more of a writing technique, really, in order to transcribe mathematics and scientific notation. So how many people in the audience work with TeX or LaTeX or know the name Don Knuth? Anybody? Okay, a couple of hands, a couple of flipped pages. Okay, that's not enough. Well, what Knuth did, is it Knuth or Knuth? You know what? If the Donald were here, he'll correct me. The upshot is, it's a very expensive process just to typeset print mathematics. Try transcribing that into a piece of paper with a bunch of dots. Now, I had a romantic notion, because as I read that, it shocked me. 40 years ago, we have the same problem that we still have today. It's a little bit different, but we still have the same general problem. And the general problem is that there's been a lot of advancement in technology. I won't deny that. What hasn't quite advanced at the same rate has been the accessibility of it. The big pushes forward, and I have to find my notes very discreetly while I'm doing this, the big pushes forward have been in the GUIs, the graphical user interfaces. Oral user interfaces, as in to speak, to hear, to listen, have not quite kept pace. I know how to get all your hands in the air right now. Who here has a phone in their pocket? Oh, come on, there's got to be more hands than that. I know some of you go around with two. I bet you it's got a flat screen on it, doesn't it? Probably made of glass. Feels smooth to the touch. Not really a Braille interface. Here's a simple case scenario that's come up time and time again. I work with, I don't want to call them clients, but I do want to call them people who I have to work with. They are, they're basically, people have to, I can't leave them by the side. I think it's part of the hacker ethos to reach out and do the impossible. So we have some impossible cases. One woman who recently lost her sight. And by recently, I mean by between now and the previous hope. And she's trying to adapt to not seeing, to being able to hear her way through the world. Well, the metaphor of windows and menus and the desktop and the folder and the cursor, throw them out the nearest trash can because they no longer apply. But the metaphor still holds true. You know, when I go to work, I work with blind people, and if I say file, folder, window, menu, they get the picture. Pun not intended, but they do. They see what I'm talking about sometimes, and sometimes better than I do. So the metaphor holds. The user interface kind of holds, but we're in this weird, strange era where we're trying to reinvent, the timeshare machine. So your UI, your interface, is being changed in a web browser. And this is where it starts getting a little hairy. So for example, going to the New York Times website, how many tabs does it take until you hit the first article? Break out your keyboard, do it now, because I can't see what the hell I'm doing up here. It's not the most accessible website. There's another one which has actually changed since the time I started writing this. And I will see if I have brought it up somewhere around here. Well, It's not quite it, but I think most of you can recognize what that map is. Or not, because this is in fact all the stations that are accessible to wheelchairs. If you zoom out, you'll start to realize that there's not a lot of stations. The world is a little different if you have a physical mobility issue. Similarly, and I will bring up the website now. Anybody want to take a guess what the next couple of letters are? Too late, I've already hit enter. The MTA has done their best to be accessible. I mean, they are technically federal, public, private, something or other, who's it's, what's it's. Screen readers have conniptions with their page. Mostly because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Did anybody notice that it flashed right at the beginning? That first tab? Let me see if I can zoom in on what it really says. Oh, good. I have a good reach. I can actually get to it. What it really says is, skip to main content. That's new, by the way. That's very new. That was not there about 3 months ago. 3 months ago, you had to go tab, 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 tab. Actually, first you had to get out of the magnifier. I'm going to come back to the magnifier in a moment or two. But you had to go tab, 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 tab. You get the picture. All the way to go down to the bottom of the page where it said, originally, text mode. So one thing I want you guys, please, take this with you on the way out. If you work in website design, if you deliver any kind of content, treat it more like radio, please. You want a journalistic approach. You want to be able to go, who, what, where, when. I don't give a damn about the why and the how. Pretend that you're dealing with a really tiny mobile screen. Because some reason or another, for example, MediaWiki, actually Wikipedia, does a very good job with their mobile site. They cut to the chase. Get to the point. Okay, this is the information I want. Okay, here's my headings. Here's my follow-ups. Here's my paragraphs. You get to the information. This is why, actually, I'm going to see if I can bring it up here, the mobile version. en.m, right? Wikipedia.you-know-what. It's actually very clean and very concise. It doesn't take a lot of bandwidth to send this out. And by the way, it's so legible. You can get a screen reader to do this. Look, here, have a listen. Let's see if we've got sound here. Yeah. Oh, I hate that stuff. Okay, let's try the other key combination then, shall we?
Start Cortana window. Search box. Editing. Desktop. Wikipedia. The free encyclopedia.
Okay, I have my screen reader a little bit faster than most people. I'm not up to 600 words per minute. I don't know if anybody was here. Then I'm running slow. I'm running at about 85%. Oh, God. Hecklers, hecklers, hecklers. Okay, I got a drink now. That's your 11Cs, by the way. But it's a very clean and concise and legible interface.
Open main menu. Link.
If
Wikipedia.
it ever
Wikipedia. The free encyclopedia. Google Chrome window. Ian Google McLaughlin. Link. Value https://n.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/Ian_Google_McLaughlin. Editable.
So you're hearing what a web page sounds like. Let me contrast it with one you guys probably already know.
Speakers. Google Chrome window. Link.
This is the speaker list. Now, the reason I chose this one is because, hey, everybody knows it, right? We've all looked at it at least once. Did you know how much this actually weighs? Anybody want to take a guess how heavy this page is? Anyone? Just shout it out. You're a pinhead. No, I can't heckle back. I'm not very good at that. Actually, whoever said 700K, you're off by a factor of 10. It's about 74K. On the default settings for any narrator, which is about 50%, which is roughly about the speed when they sort of read across, takes about an hour and 29 minutes to read. So you're going through all of this text, and it's really not navigable. There's no index, there's no guide, and you have to jump through from section to section. And in order to really demonstrate it, I should be using Microsoft Edge. Not the best interface at all. But I will bring up NVDA, which is set for speed because that's where I throw in my background.
Desktop.
Ah, Chef is in the audience, right?
Unknown.
Oh, even better. I was almost going to say even better, but at least somebody is here who can applaud to NVDA because it's a very, it's free. This is one of the points I want to get back to on text-to-speech versus Braille. Text-to-speech is free. You all have it in your freaking pocket. Braille, I will tell you how much Braille costs once I finish starting this up to read. So let's see if I can.
Mouse tracking on.
Let's do an F5. If this works, I'm in business. If not, I'll just move right along to Braille versus.
Is currently available in paperback, ebook, audiobook, and limited edition hardcover.
Okay, not bad. Carrot mode is probably disabled on it, which is why it's not working the way it should be, or the way I
menu.
expected.
Exit X.
The 11th Home speakers. Google Chrome window. Link.
Oh,
https://xi.net/index.html. Editable.
Practice your stuff
Ease of access, enter
before
window.
you show up, always. All right, but the upshot is this takes a very long time to read. If you're working just by ear, this is a very difficult process because it's not like listening to the radio. It's not like, you pop in 1010 winds, all the nerves all the time. And here's the helicopter coming over. No, it doesn't work like that because this layout is laid out for paper and ink. And the ear is not designed for that, not really as cogent a metaphor for transmitting information. But if you do want to go back to paper, anybody see Chef's presentation yesterday? He held up a nice little tchotchke. I'm very jealous of it. It is a refreshable Braille display. All it does is raise dots and put dots down. And you run your finger across, and it costs a day's pay per character. It is a very expensive piece of hardware and a very lustful piece of hardware. The one I have where I work, believe it or not, came from Dr. Abraham Nemeth. When he passed away, it eventually came to us, mostly to see if we could retrieve any documents that he may have left in draft. It has since become a training device at the place where I work. And I can't get the hang of it. Because another thing that we've noticed is I'm a little old to be learning new tricks. And I'm trying my best to learn Braille, believe me. Mostly because I am kind of worried I am losing my sight myself. Like I said, it's a little bright in here, which is why I'm here with shades. You get a lot of eye strain looking at a monitor for, 8 hours a day? Nose to screen like this? And as for the magnification, here's a magnification, if it ever works. There we go. I want to show you something. Oh, this is definitely Cory Doctorow. The funny thing is, if I get a larger print, if I just take all of this text, throw it into insert name of program here, and just increase the font size, it's not as blurred on the edges. In fact, it's about as legible as the MTA signage. So when you go into the subway and you see those big Helvetica letters, those beautiful Helvetica letters that we love so much, you have a sharp contrast between the lines of an X, the lines of an N, the line of an O. Here it's just a blur. It's a blur of pixels. This is why we invented display postscript. This is why we have SVG, so you don't get this blurring. And for a lot of people who work nose to screen, even with magnification, this is no good because the contrast is too low. Sharp contrast between black and white is necessary, but it is fatiguing for the eyes. Similarly, if I can get out of magnification, you have the same problem with ears. This is an aging population, folks. Right now, at the last statistic I had from the UN Population Agency, somewhere around here, in one of these pieces of paper, I saw it. I could have sworn I brought it with me, but okay. I'll make it up as I go along. Let's do it live, right, Radio Statler, folks? Right. There's about 600 million people right now who are over the age of 60 in the planet. That number is expected to grow. The leading causes for visual impairment are cataracts and glaucoma. That covers about 70% of all the cases. When it comes to blindness, it's about the same. I think it's actually cataracts do more damage than just... the word has just disappeared off of my tongue. La-di-da-di-da-di-da. Correctable vision errors such as astigmatism, farsightedness, nearsightedness, etc. Some of you, I'm sure, read books on e-devices or little tablets or things like that, right? How many of you prefer, and again, this is not an endorsement, the Amazon Paperwhite to the Kindle Fire, for example? Something that's reflective, smoother, easier on the eye because you're reading for hours on end? That's the same process of working nose to screen 8 hours a day. It's eye strain, and it does fatigue. Now try doing this when you have to do it by ear. A lot of people are trying to transition early. Maybe they know that they have macular degeneration. Maybe they're diabetic. They're worried about glaucoma. They're trying to transition into an audio-based interface. And you know what? Unlike Windows, unlike Macintosh, unlike name whatever you want, there is no standard audio interface other than, for English, press 1. Para español, oprima dos. That is the only standard audio interface that exists. It's on your phone. It's a call to action. I think it's time we start changing that. It should start probably with your websites. Let's say anything that's dynamic, anything that changes with JavaScript, anything that changes like this little
Desktop,
page
Gmail,
here.
Inbox.
By the way, yes, you can send email at hopexi2016@gmail.com. I am surprised nobody took that address. And you can see that this is a lot of email. Even with NVDA cranked up to maximum, it's still going to take about 11 minutes to read all of this.
Zoom, 90%. Reset to default button.
Mostly because it has a design flaw. But it's not really a design flaw, it's a feature. First off, you'll notice that I'm using the old standard view. That's their most accessible view. There are keyboard operators to use the standard view, which we all know and love, which is, cute green blinking light in the background with a dark background that everyone loves, and it looks so hackery, with the tabs and everything. You can't read it for squat. You can't navigate it for squat. You can try. It just drives you nuts. I mean, put on a blindfold. Seriously, you know what? Here we go. I am going to disconnect the monitor at this point because I really didn't need it. Something you discover at the last minute. You really don't need video in order to be able to make a presentation about a non-visual interface. There we go. I'm done. Don't need it. In fact, the laptop can
Force
now...
driver tray window. Screen resolution window. Selected. Display 1. 1 of 1. Ribbon tabs. Pane updated.
This
Lower
is
ribbon. Pane
wonderful.
updated.
So
Desktop.
I really
Task
do
switching
not
window.
need
PowerPoint slide.
any of
Presentation
that
1.
stuff.
PowerPoint slideshow. Presentation 1.pptx. PowerPoint edit view. Presentation 1.pptx. Pane. Slide 50. Slide.
Can anybody catch up on what I'm doing? I had to ask that. But the point is to read all of that text and find that one email that someone may have sent you that you may have overlooked. You have to tab through the entirety of the Gmail. Well, caveat on that one. I'll get back to that in a moment. The same way that the MTA did. You have to tab through all of that, listen to it for about 11 minutes straight, not lose focus, and be able to navigate at the same speed that you're listening. That is a lot of work. It is very strainful. It's not like listening to 1010 Wins when they say, 22 minutes will give you the world. You don't have 22 minutes. There's a program called JAWS. If I remember correctly, it's called Job Access with Sound. Speech. Thank you. Thank you. I thought it was with sound. And you're right. It's speech. At least I'm being corrected in the right direction. Hecklers. If you're doing this at work, you think your boss is thinking that you're slacking, but it takes you 10 minutes to find one email, which may or may not be relevant. That's lost productivity, folks. So consider that one, and there's a reason why we have mail clients. They're actually much easier to work with. I won't recommend Outlook, but Outlook is probably the best option out there when it comes to Windows. Mail app is fairly decent, but again, going back to Gmail, the reason it's so popular is because you have that compacted conversation view. Great. Now I have to figure out what email in what thread that email may have come from. And you really can't turn off threaded view. Excuse me, conversation view. Now, I said earlier that there is a caveat on Gmail, and Google does at least have a clue. Actually, a lot of companies have a clue. When you have a potential market of 4% of the population to buy your products, especially in less developed countries in the world, is that PC? I don't know. Not first world, and clearly not second world, because you guys don't even remember the Soviet Union. That's a big market, especially where healthcare is not available. I will reiterate, glaucoma, diabetes, malnourishment is a case, war zones is a case. So you want to tap that market. Here's how you're going to be marketable. You're going to deal with them directly. Ask them. Get to the point. Hit the gist. Say, you need email. Okay. What's the most important part in an email? Anyone? Subject. Thank you. Subject. And predicate if you want. If it takes you 10 minutes to find the one subject line you're looking for in a chain of emails where the subject line itself has changed, but the message IDs are maintained, you're not going to find it. You have to go to search. Search is going to pull up anything, including spam, junk, phishing, malware. Have I gotten sexier yet? Malware. Gesundheit. Okay.
Slide 50. Image.
Oh. And apparently,
As transition.
narrator does not want to turn
User access.
off.
Uncheck always scan this section checkbox. Task switching window. Presentation
Okay.
1.pptx. PowerPoint 2 of 5.
There we go.
Exiting narrator.
So I've got narrator off now. That's great. So malware does come up. And somewhere around here, there used to be a VGA cable of... Here it is. Okay, this is the one point where I do need it. So I kind of jumped the gun there. Malware is not entirely detectable. Phishing is not entirely detectable. This monitor is not entirely detectable. Oh, there we go. Good. I'm just going to resume where I left off, I hope. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, I'll just wing it like Radio Statler. You used to be able to diagnose certain things by ear, or at least in the 8-bit days. Anybody around from those days might possibly remember this particular sequence. Yes, that is an Indus GT drive booting up DOS XL 2.2. And you knew it was done when it went... Wrong! This happens a little too often. At the office and at a couple of clients, there was a piece of scareware. Basically an interstitial site, man-in-the-middle type thing. It redirected you to a site and said, your computer may be hacked. Please dial 1-800-you're-screwed. That's kind of being a jerk and an asshole. And if there are any children here, I would suggest you cover your ears. No, I'm not going to go there just because I can't see if there are any children here. But the more important part was this particular piece of scareware made a sort of sound. It was like a sawtooth wave. And the worst part of it was a white background and a black background and a white background and a background, white. I can't imagine how many people had an epileptic fit because of photo-induced epilepsy. The heart attack caused because the computer sounds like it's falling apart or grinding a hard drive, and all you wanted was porn. Where did this come from? Shock, panic, dead. Yes, this could actually really kill. Because, I don't know, most people I would figure on the computer, on their own, afternoon, late at night, it's a shock. And if you can't call help, you're dead. So this is serious. And now, again, this is an exaggeration, but it's a serious possibility. Finally, I want to get to a couple of points about the knock-on effect, because this is beneficial. Let me give you an accessibility type that works for... anybody got an Amazon Kindle? Okay. Great. You have a problem with DRM with your books? Mine's from O'Reilly. You're lucky. O'Reilly's a nice company. Most have DRM. Most could make their books accessible for the blind, or the visually impaired, or people who cannot hold books. If you can't physically hold a book, you can't physically read. You can't turn pages. You know, there's a reset button on this phone of mine, this lousy phone of mine. If you want to reset, you have to hold down a button for about 10 seconds. It doesn't actually say, okay, I'm going to sleep now. You know, it's not like on a Mac. I can ask any client, did you turn your computer on? And I will know. My little OLPC, actually, let me bring it out right now. My traveling partner. Excellent. You know why? Because I turn it on. I know it's turned on. Windows gives you a bupkis, but I'm going to give you guys a hack. If you run Grub 2, I know I have to swallow real hard when I say that, but Grub 2 has this feature called Play. If you configure it right, you can tell your client, who may not be able to see your monitor, who may have it disconnected, who might even be in the other room, turn it on and wait until you hear a chime. You know, it could be anything. And it will tell you unequivocally and clearly, is your computer on? Because how many of us have been there? Is your computer on? That's a stupid question because most people think it's the monitor. It's a stupider question when you're asking somebody who cannot see the monitor. Which brings me, I hope, oh, we are good for time. Perfect. Which brings me to the final anecdote. And this one really kind of, it got to me. It was one of my first lessons. The most painful lesson, perhaps. This is a client who is of a certain age, has been blind all her life. She basically had one family member, and that was her brother. He died. She depended on him for practically anything that required an eyeball, including setting up these damn things, because they're not accessible out of the box all the time. Google and Apple have kind of gotten their act together on their phones. Microsoft, I can't speak to Microsoft on this one because I haven't come across the Microsoft phone. I don't know if it's cause or effect. I really don't know. But she depended on him. And what do you do under the circumstances? No other kin. Well, she moved into a residence home, which is probably the best move, except for one small problem. She was computer savvy, and her neighbors aren't. She had been working online while most people didn't even know what online was. They thought it was something you did at the supermarket. So she moves in, and she's promised the one thing that she really needs, which is access to the cyber world. Yeah, she has access to the cyber world. We got her a laptop. We got her a really hideously expensive screen reader. Oh, it was great. You know, it doesn't make any mistakes when it tries to read Spanish. It actually knows it's Spanish. If it hits Russian, it starts speaking Russian. You know, it doesn't say, take once daily. It takes take once daily. Hay rides. No. Hay rides. Spelt the same. And when it comes into right to left languages, Arabic, Hebrew, Klingon, forget it. It's probably the only thing that can pronounce Klingon. But the problem is, in order to get to that Wi-Fi, in order to get online, she has to take her laptop to the public areas where everybody else can see her bank account except her. I heard that's fucked up. You are damn straight that was fucked up. And that was exactly my reaction. So I had to go to the manager and say, listen, buddy. And I don't usually do a buddy. But listen, buddy. How would you like it? You're worried about all the other people here who want to see photos of the grandkids. That's great. Would you like to be the source of a data breach just because somebody can look over her shoulder, see her bank account, see her credit card, and she cannot? That kind of woke them up. That really kind of woke them up. The situation is much better ever since then. Now, the final point I do want to say is I did not talk about Braille for a particular reason. It is bloody friggin' expensive. It is massively expensive. At the place I work, we produce Braille in mass quantities. We have a behemoth. I'm not kidding you. Weighs 1,000 pounds, produces a page every 6 seconds. I mean, it is big. It is a monster. It can punch holes through paper if you do it wrong. And it takes a while to produce. I mean, if you've got a Braille display, hey, you're in business. You know, solenoid up, solenoid down. But for the most part, it's a very expensive process to make Braille. Hackers, makers, you guys know everything that I don't. You're probably operating with microfluids or air pockets or, something that goes wiggle, 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 something like that. Come up with an idea, guys, because there's money to be made in this market. If they can charge the exorbitant prices, and it's really gouging, if they can charge exorbitant prices just to put a dot to come up about 1 or 2 millimeters off the page, you guys can pay your rent for life. So I suggest you get involved here. But there is one last thing, which is time is your medium. And the reason why is because Braille is expensive and text-to-speech is now included free in your pocket.
Hello, Siri. Look up something for me.
Cortana, same thing. It's free. This is an incredible thing. You wanted text-to-speech years ago, you had Speak and Spell. We've come a hell of a long way. You know, a phrase like, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it. They have 3 different meanings, and I didn't do it makes no sense. We're not at that level yet, but we are at the level where it can read, I didn't do it, or at least recognize where the emphasis is. When it comes to inflected languages, I have no idea. I don't speak any inflected language. But again, time is your medium, and this is why you want to cut to the chase, get to the point, hit the gist, and I just want to show you one last thing, which is the analog version of everything I've said. This is 45 minutes of audio. If you get 20, here we go. That I can see for some strange reason. I don't know why. If you can get 20 of these together, 2-track, you have a book. 45 minutes by 20. Do the math. Time is your medium, and mine has run out. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope I've at least moved a neuron and entertained you a little bit. Oh, but wait. A Steve Jobs moment. There's more. One last thing I am going to say, and this is really directed to the Hollywood people. Well, first off, this one's directed at Microsoft because they really ruined my day. They did updates left and right. Every time they do an update, narrator stops talking. So you don't know whether your computer's on or not. That really, it's up there. It's like a top 3 kvetch. But there's one other kvetch. And the one I want to leave you with because it's sexy. Malware. I'm at a hacker convention. I have to talk malware.
Only in Hollywood does a computer drop its pitch and slow down like this when there's malware hogging all your cores.
Pure Hollywood. There's a thing on GitHub called The Zoo. Nasty stuff. From ransomwares to Trojans to CNCs, botnets, you name it. Stuff I've never even heard of. It's invisible. I threw it on one of my available machines. You know, the screen reader's kept up. So how the hell do you know if you're running a CNC botnet? How the hell do you know if you're infected with anything? You have to hope that some AV program picks up on it. And as we know, AV is like an after-the-fact problem. So there is no real way to say to a user, hey, I know you know your stuff, but can you drop into a console, have it read back the entire console window? Give me the copy of var log, which goes on forever, as we all know, and say, have you noticed anything strange on your screen? Oh, that's right. You're blind or visually impaired. So I'm done with the sexiness. Oh, yeah. We are done, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your attendance. And hopefully I've given you a couple of ideas for the programmers, for the makers, and for the common man. I'll be available for questions afterwards, of course. And like I said, 2 o'clock en español.
Let's give another hand for Neo.